hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. So we're going to have our faithful men time for tonight, and I've asked Brother Jim King to come, and he's going to share some things that God has been working in his life and share them with you as we move forward together as a church and see our faithful men serve God and teach others also. Brother King.
Well, good evening, everybody. This is not the usual position I'm used to. But what I wanted to bring tonight, based on what our pastor had asked me to do, is tonight's topic is discipleship during COVID-19. And I'm going to be working in Matthew 28:18 through 20, and then the end of each of the chapters from Mark, Luke, and John, and then I'll reference 1 Timothy 6:20 through 21. The key thing for me when COVID-19 came into play was the isolation. We basically had to lock down, get hunkered down in the bunker, stay with the family, and that created a lot of isolation, which meant we couldn't come to the house of God, we couldn't fellowship. Communications at first was very restricted because most of us, we have a phone. But I wonder how many people know how to do Zoom, Google, or Teams. Teams came out rather late in the year. So one of the aspects is we can talk to our family member, which I found out after 2 weeks being at home, I was not as welcomed at home. So I have to take that in stride. But I've started to realize I can be an annoying person. So again, these restrictions in communications, cannot meet as a group, no in-person meetings, and you have to wear masks, so that means you can't see facial expressions. That kind of creates a whole new dilemma in the process. And the lack of support at times. That support's not always there, or you don't know where to reach out for that support. So that's a change that you had to deal with. Well, out of that crucible that Lord provided us is now we had to figure out, okay, how can I communicate without physically causing harm to others? I guess it's an interesting way of thinking of it, but I didn't want to get their germs. They don't want to get my germs, so we're trying to keep everything separate. So all of a sudden, video conferencing galore came out. Voice conferencing I knew about. That started developing. And then the video presentations, which that didn't always hit the mark. I've seen some that just, I don't know whether it was bandwidth or they just didn't know how to put the thing together and the PowerPoint fell apart halfway through. And then you're going, what was they trying to communicate? So then we started getting into two-way video call meetings. And I did find something interesting. Most people, and I'm going to pick on the females, don't want to show their picture. They just want to show something, but not live video. And I did ask one person, says, you don't want to see me without makeup, curler, the curlers in the hair and all that. And I said, yeah, I agree. I don't want to see that. And again, there was this tendency to revert to voice and not look at video. So it was kind of funny, because I've been on some conference calls in the Teams, and if all I see is these little logos, or I see a picture of a dog, or I see a picture of an airplane, and all I hear is the voice. So again, we're revitalizing how we communicate. For me, that put me back in a role almost 12 years ago. I used to do online training with voice conference call, and back then we had SharePoint. It was something we could share the PowerPoint. And some people used to get irritated with me because I'd ask questions repetitively because I'm listening for tone of voice. And the voice would tell me, did they understand or did they not? Because that's the hard part of communications. If you project it out, you got to find out, did they receive it? Did they understand it? Go back to Communications 101. And a lot of people got annoyed, but I asked that question because if I heard a certain inflectuation in the voice, boom, I knew I had a problem. And I'd have to go back over that point because I'm trying to teach them how to operate a system using a PowerPoint presentation on a shared network and conference call. So there was a lot one has to do, so we had to revitalize that. So we got that going. One of the fundamental things, I'll be honest, I hate writing. But you have to write to communicate, and you have to make sure it's effective, and you have to watch out. I had one person that finally corrected me, you need to say good morning. And I went, okay, so I need to put good morning, good afternoon. Yeah, because you sound like a robot when you write your email out. And I said, okay, I can fix that. I can move out of that. But it started to be like, how many times have I got to, you're typing along, and I type. It's a good skill I picked up in high school. Then I did it for non-credit because I knew I couldn't pass that kind of course. But I got up to 30 words a minute, so I was proud of that. But then you had to get into the online teaching, so that's something you have to learn. And some of the systems I've used, Google I don't like because I can't see what I'm teaching and see the audience. So it makes it difficult, so I have to rely on what I'm hearing. So again, writing slows you down, but I look at that as a benefit. If you're writing it, you start to think about, if I say it this way, it could come across the wrong way. If I say it this way, is it going to raise a question? I'm trying to make sure I get my message across and get some feedback, that I'll get an answer. Not an answer, say, shut up, don't ever talk to me again, I don't want to be heard from you. So again, but the fundamentals as we look at in this process is, as you go down through the process, is prayer, reading the Bible, still consistent. Study groups, we wound up doing study groups by phone or just, in writing. But letter writing is just as important in that process, and communicating. And I thought back when you look at, when God said in Matthew 28 at the end, he says, go forth, spread the word and the gospel. And to me, that means discipleship, which means you're going to build other people to be disciples that follow your steps. Back then, they didn't have phones. They didn't have all this wonderful means of communication. So when Paul was talking to Timothy, Paul was working with the different people, it had to be done by writing. And that is a very difficult thing. And of course, it reminds me of some of the naval history I used to study. When they sent a captain on a ship, they had orders, but he would get no updated orders for 6 years because he wouldn't come back to port for 6 years. That was kind of scary. What do? You have latitude, but, if the order says don't do this, it's a long way to get an answer back from England because there's no way to get it back. You have to either come home or get a ship to bring it to you. So the mission still has stayed the same, and that is to bring in new disciples, growth, and spread the good news. And how we do that is by setting the example and fellowshipping in the best way we can. This has been a trying year because I can't go out and meet people. I had to stay isolated. I had to stay within the framework of what they wanted us to do in that process. So that's kind of a restriction, but I look on the bright side. It brought me back, study the Bible more, start getting into letter writing, which is not my favorite thing. I think that's normal for men. We just don't like to write letters and do that. So to us, it was a new problem. What I chuckle about, it wasn't a new problem for God, because God says you pray and you listen. I think that's one thing I started to realize. Listen. Listen for what God's trying to say and what direction he's trying to move us in. But at the same time, we have new ways. We can reach out. The new thing about Teams, I do like it. I can push a button, and I accept they won't show their picture, but I can get a response. It's like having an intercom. I can push that button. I can talk to somebody in Hawaii. I can talk to somebody in Alaska. I do have to be respectful of time. I've only done that one time when I called, and it was 2 a.m. in the morning. Learn my lesson not to always check the clock before you make that phone call. But our foundation's still there. And we have the bridges through these basic tools to reach out to the folks that we want to reach into and help spread the word. And the other aspect is you got to listen. You got to hear what your people around you are saying and use that to help focus where God wants us to do. And like today's morning lesson, I said it reinforced what I'm used to at work. You got to learn to turn the other cheek very easily, because I've had people get very upset in communication, especially foreigners, because that's my new role is policy up in headquarters. So through that effort, we can overcome the barriers and obstacles. And when I look at 1 Timothy 6:20 through 21, and it seems like it's a little bit out of context what we've been talking about, but it talks about the barriers, the problems that you can encounter. And he said, stay the course. That's the gist of what he was ending that chapter on. And I said, I agree. So with that said, I'm going to stop there. Any questions? If none, I'm stepping back, and it's your pulpit, sir.